Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, May the 5th, or as we like to say in Texas, Cinco de Mayo, Monday, May the 5th, and welcome to our commentary. Well, Cinco de Mayo, of course, is, I've written about this before. My friend Alan Wall wrote something about this today as well. Cinco de Mayo is probably one of the most interesting holidays that you'll ever see. It's not officially a holiday in the United States, but it's celebrated in certain parts of the country. Here in Texas, obviously celebrated with a lot of enthusiasm. The restaurants are full, a lot of business they do. They sell a lot of beer, a lot of nachos, and lots of chips and salsa on this day. And it's an interesting story. The whole idea of the 5th of May, or Cinco de Mayo, has really nothing to do with Mexico, because in Mexico, what they celebrate on the 5th of May is what is known as the Battle of Puebla. And the Battle of Puebla had nothing to do with the United States. The Battle of Puebla was back in 1862 between Mexican soldiers and the French, who at the time fighting for control of Mexico. And there was a very famous battle in Puebla where a Mexican army, completely undermanned, defeated the more elite, sophisticated French army, or at least the French troops that were there that day. So this was seen as a big victory of patriotism in Mexico. So they've always celebrated the Battle of Puebla on the 5th of May. Okay, that's what they've always celebrated. But it's not really a major celebration. I mean, I lived in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 4 years, and I remember the Battle of Puebla, the celebrations. They were not huge celebrations, but I mean, people would remember. And what they were really remembering was the fact that these Mexican soldiers, I think they were younger soldiers, put up quite a fight against the more elite and better prepared French troops. And it's kind of seen as a victory of Mexican honor and all that kind of stuff. So that's what the 5th the 5th of May is in Mexico. It has nothing to do with what we celebrate up here. Not exactly sure when we started celebrating the 5th of May in the United States, or Cinco de Mayo. Some people say that it happened in the 1970s or 1980s. And I think it's become more of a day of celebrating Mexican American heritage. That's what I think it is. And that's what they celebrate. Mexican American heritage. So this is kind of like, just like, you have Irish American Day or whatever in other parts of the country. I guess Columbus Day would be that, or Italian American for Columbus Day. This is kind of a day of celebrating Mexican heritage, and that's all that it is. And people, particularly here in the Southwest, in Texas, well, they just have a good time. They march, they go out to eat, they celebrate their heritage, and that's what it's all about. And it's it's a good deal. It's a happy day, to say the least, for the people involved. And I think it's gotten bigger and bigger over time, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for people to celebrate their heritage. So that's really what Cinco de Mayo is. Has nothing to do with Mexican independence. In fact, it has very little to do with Mexico, the country to our south, and has everything to do with the Mexicans here, particularly Mexican Americans, who make up, let's say, a big portion of South Texas or New Mexico or Arizona, or wherever it may be. So that's what Cinco de Mayo is. It's a day of celebrating Mexican American heritage, and I love it. I'm not Mexican American myself, but I just love the idea that we celebrate heritage. I've always been a big fan of celebrating heritage. I think it's important for people to know where they came from. And what makes Cinco de Mayo the best is that Cinco de Mayo, the food is great. I mean, the number of restaurants, they get all dressed up, and there are some parades in different parts of the city where you have these little girls, dressed up as from different parts of Mexico, and it's really nice. And of course, the food is fabulous. So if you like Tex-Mex food, this is a great day to go out to lunch. So happy Cinco de Mayo to all of our Mexican American friends. Happy 5th of May to all of our friends. And again, if you go down to Mexico And you talk to Mexicans about Cinco de Mayo, they're not going to know what you're talking about because they don't celebrate any such thing. It's completely up here in the United States, particularly it started, I guess, in the Southwest. And now it's gone national. I was doing an interview this morning with a network out of Miami, and I guess they celebrated too in Miami. You would think they would celebrate more Cuban heritage there, but no, they put some emphasis on Cinco de Mayo too. So I'm glad. I'm glad. But the best part, I'll say it again, the best part about Cinco de Mayo is the food that you're going to eat today, which is great Mexican food, Tex-Mex food, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely great day to have some chips, some salsa, a nice drink. In my case, enchiladas. I love them. And some nachos for maybe an appetizer. Have some nachos with your friends when you go out to lunch. So happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about the insanity of these 100-day report cards, where we give presidents report cards after 100 days. And somehow we think that we're going to be able to judge a presidency based on 100 days. The fact is that this 100-day measurement, I think it started with President Roosevelt, who set out to do some big things in his first 100 days. And of course, when he came in 1933, the country was in a very bad recession. I think they called it a depression. 25% of men were unemployed. I mean, the country had pretty much come to a stop. The banks were closing. I mean, it was a situation of panic in the country, economic panic, to say the least. So he set out to do some things in his first 100 days. And I think that's where the whole thing started from, the first 100 days. And ever since then, we've had other presidents talk that way. But frankly, it's an absolutely insignificant and completely idiotic measurement. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. I talk about this in my article. At this moment of his presidency, meaning 100 days, President Obama was walking on water. He could do no wrong. The guy was walking on water. He was about to be given the Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing, really. And everything, everybody kept talking about, my gosh, Obama is going to go down in history as one of the greatest and most consequential. 18 months later, November 2010, he gets blown away in the congressional elections. He has a horrible day in the congressional elections. What happened? Well, he had to explain Obamacare, and that was not easy. That was not easy to do. And, he kept taking a beating. More Democrats kept walking away from Obamacare, and pretty much eventually it cost the Democrats and President Obama the House. It almost cost them the Senate. That happened in 2014. But that was the end of Obama walking on water. After that, it was more of, what can he get done, and more realistic, I guess, assessment of where he was going. And the same thing is going to happen with President Trump. Eventually, what President Trump is doing, we're going to find out what he's doing. Eventually, all these balls up in the air are going to come down, and some are going to crash. Others are going to come down well. They're going to get the reconciliation bill to the Senate, and they're going to be doing some things that are good and bad, I guess, depending on where you see it. I actually think what's going to happen is over the next 90 days or so, during the summer, they're going to do some of these, let me turn this off. They're going to be doing some of these trade deals. And I think you're probably going to see a bunch of them done fairly quickly once they do the first one. And that's going to make things a lot more stable because we'll have a much better trade situation with many of these countries. And then they're going to put through the plan for reconciliation, which is going to be big for President Trump. And then I think come September, October, maybe November, we'll have a much better sense of where this is going. Now, I happen to be optimistic about where he's going, but look, it could also go south. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a prophet and I know exactly what's going to happen because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm taking a guess based on what I believe, and especially the people that he surrounded himself with. But, it could go either way. But we certainly don't have a clue of which way it's going to go at this stage of the game, 90 days, 100 days, whatever. That's why I call it the insanity of these 100-day report cards. It's absolutely crazy to say the least. Well, let me leave you with I have a post coming out tomorrow where I talk about President Trump and the comments that he made yesterday on Meet the Press. First of all, he said he's not running. He says people want him to run, but he's not planning to, which I think is very smart, because I don't think he can do it based on the Constitution. So why force the issue? But what's interesting is what he said about Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance, where he brought both of them up in a very positive light. And, it's going to be interesting to see how these two men go, because at the moment, Secretary Rubio is really gaining in influence and really gaining in strength in this administration. He is doing very well in this administration. And then, of course, Vice President Vance the same way. He's also advancing, and he's become a really good spokesman for the Trump administration, particularly with the MAGA base. So I had never seen that before, where you have a president almost sit there and say, I've got these two guys around me, and not necessarily endorse Vance, but at the same time leaving the door open to Secretary Rubio, or perhaps, as I mentioned in my article, what we may be seeing right here is the team, the 2028 team that President Trump wants to put together, and that is Rubio and Vance, or Vance and Rubio. But we've never seen that before, and that's because we've never had a situation like what President Trump finds himself in right now, where you have a president who cannot run for another term, with some very capable people on his team, and frankly, a lot of very capable people on the bench in the Republican Party. So I don't know where it's all going to go, but I just thought it was interesting of President Trump to elevate Rubio as he did, and almost put him at par with the vice president, which I thought was a fascinating, absolutely fascinating thing to do. But again, it's all speculation. We don't know where this is going to be in 2028. And of course, a lot depends on the record of the presidency. That's always the bottom line. The vice president is always going to have to defend the record of the president. And if it's a good record, he's got a great shot. If it's a bad record, as we saw with Kamala Harris, she had a lot of problems because of the record of President Biden. So 2028 is a long time away, but I just thought it was interesting for President Trump to bring this up the way he did, and to introduce us really to what he's thinking about these two men, who obviously he values both of them a great deal. He values both of them a great deal, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for him and the country. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.